All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new edition of Pod by the Bay, proudly presented by the Bay Area Examiner. I'm your host, Nathan Bond. Joined alongside me, Robert Steeg and Seth Varnadore. Fellas, we are so close to an actual live USF college football game. I can almost quite literally taste it. Let's go.
We're in our mock game week right now. Steve's so excited he had to jump off for a second. we're in our own mock game week right now. We're excited. What are we, like 10 days ish? Yeah. So that'll be fun. And then the game will happen, and then it may be fun still, or it may be a nightmare.
I agree. This 2023 season for your South Florida Bulls, there's a lot of expectations. Some rightly, some not so much, and I think that's kind of what we're gonna talk about tonight on this edition of Pod by the Bay. We're gonna talk about the South Florida Bulls 2023 and 2023 only expectations as we careen towards September 2nd at 3:30 p.m. at Western Kentucky on CBS Sports Network. The Vegas odds have USF's over-under at 4 wins. That seems like the good jumping off point. Seth, let's throw it to you. We're going to do it tier. There's going to be 3 different tiers. Worst case scenario, realistic scenario, best case scenario. Let's go worst to best,
All right.
And we'll go from there. Absolute worst case scenario for you under head coach Alex Golesh in year 1 of this new regime.
Right. So I think if you're thinking worst case scenario, I would say that the game against Florida A&M, despite being close in SP Plus, I think that should be a win, even if the team's not great this year. You have enough talent, and you should be able just to kind of line up and run the ball and control that game pretty well. And then you have a Charlotte team. I guess the worst case scenario would really be that, your transfers come in, they don't gel, your defense stays really poor, your offense isn't quite able to put it together, because there are question marks. I think there's talent at receiver, but there's still question marks, like who's going to be the guy. There's talent on the offensive line, but there's still question marks there because not all of them have done it here before. You got a lot of transfers, some JUCO guys. Who knows how that'll gel, right? You feel pretty solid in the running back room. You feel pretty good in the quarterback room. But as we saw last year, injuries, so you're a couple, injuries away from it being really tough. So I think worst case scenario is you win one game, you beat Florida A&M, and then you hit Charlotte at the end of the year, and Charlotte's 50 transfers have gelled by that point, and they beat you. That's probably the worst possible case scenario. Now, I think this is the least likely of the 3 scenarios we're talking about, but that would be it, right? The defense, no improvement, and then the offense doesn't quite gel quickly enough, and they aren't able to. It's just like the last few years. That would be the worst case scenario.
Steve, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, as I puddle through everything, and it's again not an indictment of the current team, but just kind of the current luck of the draw. I worst case scenario, you end up over here, and I mean that in a way that you might just get really unlucky again for the 4th straight year, really. Florida A&M, which should be a talent disparity, you could get unlucky. The injuries pile up, against Western Kentucky. Your team's not fully healthy by then. Florida A&M brought a good bit of transfers in themselves from Division I schools. So, the talent disparity isn't too massive there, albeit there's quite a lot of distractions there. The other teams that you're statistically better prepared for, the Rices of the world and Navies and Charlottes and, debatably Temple at times, you just can't hit that stride against them, and you get the unluck just continues. And I don't think it's likely. I think under new regime, under everything else, you should be able to see the improvement. You have depth there at certain positions. I think they'll talent their way to a win or two, but I think in the worst case scenario, something horribly happens against Western Kentucky. You have to roll out a quarterback that may not be ready. You have to roll out, receivers that may not be 100% healthy. And then you walk into, a game that you probably should win against Florida A&M and just can't. And then at that point, the season's just going to snowball from there, because you're at that point, Alabama's just going to come in and bully the shit out of you for.
Don't worry, you got Alabama the next week,
right?
On national TV.
Nice recovery,
right?
Yeah, that is worst case scenario, right?
But I think that's every team's worst case scenario. Like, honestly.
Right. Honestly, Bama's never going to go over.
Georgia's could win 8 games sleepwalking, probably.
Yeah. So worst case scenario, right? We've had who's going to be the quarterback question mark hovering around this program for this is basically 6 years at this point since Quentin Flowers' final season at USF. I don't. And in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm fairly certain no quarterback has started more than 8 games in a season. Maybe Blake Barnett was maybe 18, I think. Maybe in 2018 he did before he got hurt, maybe 2019. But it's been a long time since we've had a guy just kind of go through. And you guys may even correct me live on air. I don't know, but
it says he played in 11 games in 2018.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know if he started 11, but
I'm pretty sure he came back in for the bowl game. So there's that. That was Chris Odokin's final nail in the coffin where, okay, I'm going to transfer. So there's been instability at that quarterback position. And if you guys listen to the Blog Boy Roundtable, I'm massive on you need a good quarterback in college football. It's not groundbreaking, I know, but you need some stability at quarterback. And USF has not had that. Worst case scenario, you're cycling through 4 quarterbacks. And now you're on the back half of the season, absolutely on the struggle bus. And now you got to figure out, hey, do I want to burn Izzy Carter's red shirt for what essentially is a catastrophe of a season? Like, Steve, your worst case, you're 0-3 going into Rice, and basically all of the momentum is already sapped out of this program in September. I mean, it's nothing new. It's happened over the last 4 or 5 years where there was legitimate groundswell even last season. People were excited going into the season, and then you got smacked by BYU, and that was it. That is still on the table. And like, as the pessimistic side of things, you never figure out the quarterback. The offensive line doesn't gel because you are replacing 80% of your offensive line. Your wide receivers who need to get healthy. Golesh said that on Tuesday that they're trending in the right direction to be healthy. I saw Yusuf Terry go off to the side and ride the bike on Tuesday like that. Those are things that continue to be concerns. It's this wide receiver room. Golesh said it multiple times. They can be really, really good or really, really average. And then the defense is just still a tire fire, regardless of the switches and the incoming influx of alleged talent. And you're staring at 1-11, 2-10, and you fired a guy to win maybe one more game or the same amount of games in a worse conference. That's a tough look. I don't think it's likely, but it's a tough look, and that's where I think that's the floor for this year. And you can only go up, I guess. That'd be
if you want the real worst case scenario, which disclaimer is not going to happen. But really, worst case scenario, they nix the stadium deal. Alex Golesh resigns, gets out of his contract scot-free, and now they're screwed. That would be the worst case scenario.
It would.
So if Golesh is
realistically.
back next year, it's a win, right?
Is it? Yeah. Theoretically, yes.
That would be the really worst case. But I think that's off the table. But because isn't that built in his contract, or the stadium stuff gets, or that was kind of one.
I think that was kind of like an understood thing, like kind of like, hey, we'll do this, and kind of like an agreement, kind of under the table handshake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a legit possibility that like at the end of the month, the Florida governors doesn't approve the stadium, and USF is like, oh crap, and then Golesh is like, well, I'm out of here, guys, deuces. If you're not building this thing, and then game 1 against Western Kentucky, interim head coach,
and he goes, good luck in Bowling Green.
That's the real worst case. So one win doesn't seem so bad by comparison.
By comparison. And now I'll let you guys pick. Do you want to go on the polar opposite side of worst case to the best case scenario and then end it with realistic, or do you want to end it with best case scenario?
I think let's go maybe go best case, just as a nice little palate cleanser.
Okay.
From the saying that Golesh is going to resign before the Western Kentucky game. 10 days.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off then, right? I was talking to some folks at the Bulls block party over the weekend, and I'm not a believer in momentum. I especially in a game, I think I don't know. I've never been a believer in momentum, but man, if you beat Western on September 2nd, and then you beat FAMU, and you're 2-0 going into Bama, and you're losing to Bama. I'm sorry, like even in the best case scenario, you're not beating Bama. Like,
but you cover. Let's say you cover.
Yeah, you cover. You cover. All right, and then you beat Rice, and you go up to Navy, who I don't think is going to be very good this year, and you beat Navy on September 30th. And you turn the page to October, and you're sitting at 4-1, and you only have to win 2 more games to be bowl eligible, and you still have UAB and FAU and UConn and Temple and Charlotte on the schedule. You got to feel pretty freaking good about your chances of being bowl eligible for the first time since 2018. That is the absolute best case scenario. Is you go guns blazing, you shut down Austin Reed, you shut down Malachi Corley, you do everything that you can. The defense goes from quite literally the worst to bad. Stinky. Like 131 to 98. 98. Let's pump the brakes, all right? The offense clicks. You figured out the quarterback. You haven't had any devastating injuries to any skill position players that you were relying on. And that's the massive question mark is, are we going to see the soft tissue injuries that we've seen over the last couple of years? That's what I'm interested in. That they brought in a director of speed and agility and all of this stuff. This is where I want to see it get paid off. That you're healthy. You get out of Bama, relatively scot-free. Yeah, you cruise through Rice, you cruise through Navy. Nobody's knees have been chopped off by Navy, and you go up to UAB. You're 2-0 in Birmingham over the last 7 years or something like that. I can't remember how they did against UAB, but you're 2-0 in Birmingham, and you continue that trend. You beat UAB. And you're sitting pretty at home the next week to knock off FAU and become bowl eligible and be 6-1 at the just over halfway point of the season.
Yeah,
sign me freaking up.
And then you still got UConn, which who knows? Last year they won some games last year, but they also seemed like they played a weird brand of football. Then Temple at home and Charlotte. Those are all 3 not games that you think you'd be in terms of it's probably within a touchdown, the spreads, I would bet. So yeah, I agree. I think that the best case scenario, if everything goes well, you're making a bowl game, which if they make a bowl game in this first year, that is huge. That is just a massive improvement. That'll be more wins in 1 year than the entire last 3 years combined, correct?
Yep, and
Yeah.
one fewer than Charlie Strong's last year and Jeff's 3 years.
So I mean, just if it lays out like Nathan's saying, you could get to 7. I think if you can steal if you steal Western Kentucky, that changes the math. I don't think you get that one, but there's still, you could be, if AMU, Rice, Navy, and UAB are all winnable. I think those are all winnable games to start, and then if you get that momentum going. Some of it is more, instead of maybe not momentum, but like a little bit of a belief, a little confidence, because I think that's something this team has lacked. Even going back to Strong's last year, we talked to people on staff, and they're like, "This team has no confidence. This team has no like swag or belief in themselves. It's kind of all fake juice, right?" So, but if you can get that, you got a bunch of guys that are new. You got a coaching staff that's new. They won't know any better at that point. They'll think, "Hey, man, we just got to figure it out." So. Best case scenario, I agree. Bowl game. I think that's more likely than the worst case scenario, but it's still not the most likely, I don't think. But it's on the table. The schedule is not hard comparatively to some years past.
No, it's not. Steeg, what's your best case scenario?
Yeah, it's. And I don't want to harp on the past too much, but like last year, I think USF had like the injury slider turned like all the way up, and it resulted in just the worst of luck, right? Yeah. But we didn't really see that from other teams, and so I think like best case scenario, that script kind of gets flipped, because you look at some of these teams that you can kind of chalk up like a loss to, and again, I'm taking Alabama out of this equation. You look at FAU. If Casey Thompson gets hurt, if Larry McConnell gets hurt, Larry McConnell, cannot remember his name. If they get the injury bad luck that we had, maybe that game flips. You look at a team like Memphis, if Seth Hennigan gets hurt, things might flip flop here and there a few times. UTSA, Frank Harris gets hurt. Who knows what's behind him? He's on his 6th year.
I'd be so sad. I would be right. I would be too.
But you realistically, I mean. There are games that you can win on this schedule that like you might be able to flip. And I think that's what I would want as my best case scenario, is that you're able to flip a game on its head because the other team had injury bad luck and you did it this year. I talked about it a little bit. It's like, Jeff Scott, for all intents and purposes, like did everything he possibly could to put the team in a competitive state last year. And then 56 players got injured, and it's kind of like, well, what are you supposed to do at that point? Like, you can only build up depth so much. Maybe that injury bug gets spread out to some other teams and things get flipped. So I think at the best you can kind of get 8 games out of a win, or out of this 8 wins out of this schedule like this, given you might be able to pull a really good rabbit out of your hat. I think there are games that they're just going to straight up lose because the team is brand new and there's a lot of gelling, and there's some continuity, elsewhere around the conference. So you might have to deal with that. But I think 8 wins is probably my like absolute best case scenario. We're going to put a contingency to put a statue of Alex Golesh at the stadium. We're going to commission, the ACC is going to be calling us and be like, please, how much money do you need for us to be blessed to have the University of South Florida in our wonderful conference? And then, you get started and wheels start going again.
Yeah, let's give us SMU share.
Yeah, just give us what they didn't want.
Psychopaths.
Seriously.
That's oil money right there. Sorry, just on a tangent. That's just oil money. Just like, yeah, we can cover that. That's fine.
Yeah, your measly $30 million.
Unbelievable. All right, let's focus on the realistic. As I mentioned, the over-under is 4. That's DraftKings Network. They don't know it, but they are the unofficial sponsor of our sports betting for the Bay Area Examiner, Blog Boy Roundtable, and Pod by the Bay. So shout out to them. Just don't tell them that we're saying that they're unofficially sponsoring us. 4 wins. Seth, realistically, what should we expect from this 2023 iteration of South Florida football?
So we talked about it on the Blog Boy Roundtable. If you didn't listen and watch. I think 4 is the number. I went on a Rice pod early in the summer, and I said I thought 4 was the number. I look at, so if you guys don't follow Kelly Ford on Twitter I think he's at K Ford Ratings. He does a great job, and he's got basically realistic expectations out for every team. He's got USF at 4.7 wins is kind of where he has them. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games on their schedule that are within one score either way in terms of what his predicted line is. So I think you win FAMU, which is not one of those games, and then you win 4 of those 7. You win more of those toss-ups than you don't. That gets you to 5. I think you're over the 4 wins. I think 4 to 5 is realistic. I went over, but I think 4 is a real big possibility. It's really, this team hasn't won a lot. Winning something, you kind of got to learn a little bit too. So there might be a game that they should win, and we've seen it the last few years. How many games have they probably should have won? You get down to the end of the game, somebody doesn't make a play, something happens, they end up losing. If they can make those plays in a couple more games, that could get them to that, bowl game area. But I don't expect them to make all those plays in all those games. So I think 4, right where the number's at. Those guys make a lot of money in Vegas for a reason. Now this team, just real quick on Kelly's, he had them at like 4.5 wins last year, and they underperformed expectations quite a bit, 129th in the country in performance relative to their expectations last year. Now, some of that might be what Steeg mentioned with the injury luck. I think that's a big part of it. But, I think 4 is a good number. I think if you get to 4, you feel pretty good, especially compared to the last few years. 4 seems great.
Steeg?
I think I've got 5. I'm
another over.
I'm teetering on it. I'm teetering on the 4 and 5. If it was 4.5, I'd be beside myself because I'm now understanding bettering terms and everything like that. But I keep on thinking back to something that I mentioned last night in the Discord, and it's I'm gonna go off on a tangent for a second. It's the Theseus's ship parable. I think at a point, because I think everyone's main talking point about this team right now is, can the defense get fixed? Can the defense be, like Nate mentioned, Nathan, sorry, I keep on calling you Nate. Can they
Unreal.
Unreal.
This Nathan Brown of the Bay Area.
This team be bad, not terrible on the defensive side of the ball? And I think if in a Theseus's paradox, you look and you basically replace a lot of the major players from the team last year. You replace the entire defensive staff. And from what we're hearing from the defensive staff, who, again, this is a completely different staff, is that the defense is putting it together. They're playing well together. They're gelling. They have things to learn here and there, but they're doing well. They've exceeded Golesh's expectations. He mentioned that. And again, these are new people coming in bright-eyed and cheery and everything like that. So I think at an extent you have to kind of say they probably are going to be better on defense. I think in the most simplest terms, they're going to be. It's whether, and the offense, can it keep up? They blazed a trail last year. I think there might be a little bit of a drop off, but I think that's where you might get the 5th win, is that this is a different team with a different system, with a different belief, with a different guy calling the plays. And so you won't get the mistakes at the end of the game that result in, a loss. You won't get a bad 4th and 3 call at Temple that resulted in, a terrible decision or anything like that. So, I mean, you look at it, Florida A&M, Rice, Navy, UAB, and Charlotte gives you the 5 win, it gives you the 5 wins right there. Again, I'm tossing it up because I don't think UAB is that bad, but I think UAB has the potential to be that bad just because I'm not a Dilfer believer at this time. I haven't seen enough, proof of concept there.
Steeg, are you telling me you don't trust a guy who was coaching high school defenses to be able to take on the college game as a defense coordinator?
He played in the NFL, right? That's the big thing for him is that he played in the NFL, and
he brought his DC from his high school. His defense coordinator is the DC from his high school, and then the offensive coordinator is Chris Morrison's son. This is insane to me.
High school coaches, it's not the jump's not as big, but yeah, I wouldn't. If I'm a first year head coach, I'd probably get some guys a little more experience, but.
Like Brian Van Gorder was right there for him. You just
well, I don't know. I think that may be a net positive that they didn't hire him.
But yeah, I think 5 wins. I think 5 wins is my realistic glass is half full expectation. Don't remind me of the expectations I had in the past, please. Thank you.
Okay, fair.
Don't check my post history.
Realistic. I think it's 4. On Block Boy Roundtable, I said I thought it was going to be a push. If you force me to go over under 4, I think I'm going to go under. They're bad until they're not bad, and I am going to stick by that. And see, you mentioned we've kind of harped on it about the defense, right? The offense is for sure not going to be what they were. They finished 30th in SP Plus last year. They were
really good.
The offense was not bad, and the offense was not the issue for the majority of the season, right? I mean, you have 2 guys who are now 3 guys who are playing P5 football off that offense last season. You have another one who's playing at a conference foe at ECU. Like there are some dudes that were on this offense. And to expect them to keep that pace is asinine, and you're setting yourself up for failure. There are going to be bumps in the road, especially early on with this offense. Like what you see Western do is what USF is going to want to do eventually. They're going to want to throw the ball all over the place, create mismatches, find their guy, and go with it. It's going to take a while for them to figure that out. There's only so many practices in fall camp and spring, and especially with the injuries to the wide receiver position in spring and fall so far, it's tough to figure out who that guy is. And once we figure out who the quarterback is and they start gelling, it may help. But I think 5 is a stretch. It's realistic, but it's a stretch. I think 4 is pretty good, and honestly, 3's fine for me. If once again you start seeing the improvement later in the year, and I think the most realistic thing that I want to convey to the fan base is you cannot, and I mean this sincerely, judge them off of Western and Alabama. Western is going to be one of the more prolific offenses and teams that they're going to face, and then Bama is Bama. Let's reassess after September 30th and see where we're at. I think that's the realistic expectations. I know it's going to be doom and gloom. The game day threads, Twitter is going to be a set ablaze when Western just pops 45 off on them. Like, oh, here we go again. No, Western's really freaking good. They've got a really good offense.
They played a really good South Alabama team in the bowl game that had a really good defense, and they just throttled them 44-23, and it was like easier than the score would indicate too.
Yes.
So they're good.
They just let's figure out what this team looks like after Rice and Navy, maybe even into UAB, and go from there. I think that's the proper realistic expectations, because if you're going off 2 of your first 3 games when you're going up against dudes, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. And if you think losing to Western is a failure, then you don't know where this program's been the last 6 years.
On our just to mention the K Ford ratings again, he's got kind of the expectations for how often do they win this many games. 3 to 5 is 64% of the time they win 3 to 5 games.
Makes sense.
So I think that tracks to me.
Yep.
Isn't that what we just said?
Basically,
That
was the range. That was the range we gave right there.
You're welcome.
3 to 5.
That's us in a nutshell. I think in the most telling way possible.
Well, I like how you were the most negative in the worst case scenario, and then the most positive in the best case scenario.
Listen.
You're a man of extreme.
I was going to say something I shouldn't. Go into the next segment. Hurry before I say something I shouldn't.
Well, I think that's it.
That's it. We wanted to set expectations. We next week it's game week, baby. We're gonna be previewing football. There's gonna be real stuff to talk about. Maybe we'll know who the quarterback is by then. Who knows? Maybe we'll know if you got something in your eye, Seth?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries. Maybe the wide receiver will be healthy. Maybe we'll find out more. But until then, we don't. And it's exciting times, and college football is upon us. As we record this on Wednesday evening, we're 3 days away from college football.
That's right.
Week 0.
One last question for you guys. Over under on how many oars are on the depth chart? Because I'm assuming we'll get one next week.
There's what, 23 or 24 positions?
Are you talking about just a quarterback or every single position?
Every single position. How many oars are we talking?
All
What's the over under?
I can book 4 oars already for quarterback. Like I was just told, told that straight up. They're gonna be oars next to every single quarterback. And then I made the joke, wow, you guys are really leaving out Ryan Bolduc, and that's messed up. And I got a cackle and a laugh. Yeah, I feel bad for him. 12 and a half.
12 and a half oars. All right, Steeg, over or under? What are you thinking?
I'm gonna go with 20 and a half. I feel like they're gonna just absolutely. I think they're gonna go with a lot of oars here. I think that depth chart is just gonna look like I know we joked about Jeff Scott doing the blank depth chart, but that blank depth chart is about to tell us more than what this oar chart is gonna look like, because it's gonna be like every position or.
And if you want to hear us talk about some of those oars, we're going to go deep dive on the defense for the Patreon Extra podcast this week. The Ponderosa is about the defense, and we even throw a little special teams in for Steeg. So if you're not subscribed to that, jump in there. There's some really good stuff, some good info in the Discord, some good info on the Patreon, and some good info in the Extra podcast. So if you're looking for more USF content, join us on Patreon.
And with that, thanks for tuning in. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.